The future is a concept. It doesn't exist. As the proverb says, tomorrow never comes. There is no such thing as tomorrow. There never will be, because time is always now.
Welcome to the Philosophical Minds podcast, the podcast about the stuff we wonder about.
And other things.
With Avery Hopkins, black belt hermetic artist, if there were such a thing. He's a returning guest here to give us a deeper understanding and insight into consciousness and how it relates to matter. The operative alchemist himself, Avery Hopkins. Welcome back, brother.
Hey, Sky. Thanks for having me. Glad I could come on and talk to you some more.
Definitely. It's been about a year almost since we last spoke. I've probably received more positive feedback in regards to our last conversation than any other so far.
Awesome.
I'm grateful to have the opportunity to sit and talk with you again, so thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that you did get that positive feedback. And I don't get to do these often. I'm sure you've seen how busy I can be at times. So I really appreciate you taking the interest, taking the time, and to hear that your fans and followers also appreciate the content. So it's one of my favorite things to actually be able to deliver all of this information and make it a little less mysterious, since I know even my own work can get mystified sometimes due to my, location out in the mountains and an inability to communicate all the time. So thank you.
Definitely. Yeah, for the most part, the alchemical approach seems to be kind of an untapped well in terms of production as it relates to legitimate medicinal healing modalities, and you're kind of uncommon amongst uncommon men in that regard in terms of your work and understanding as it applies to the various spagyrics, oils, herbal extracts, etc. I hear stories all the time about the FDA coming after companies producing natural herbal remedies, I'm curious, have you ran into any pushback from them in regards to any of your work or your product?
No, I haven't. And something I've done over the years as I've gone forward in building Kymia is to actually establish it as a legitimate laboratory. So my lab is, I'm out in New Mexico, as most know, and my lab is CGMP certified. So that's like good manufacturing. And I have FDA registration. I actually work with Los Alamos National Laboratories, which is a federal funded research lab, and a couple other laboratories. Excuse me. And I've gone through all of the paperwork to make sure that anything I produce will never come under scrutiny from any sort of federal law or agency. And that's something that's unique, I think, within this, is because I treated it as if it was a chemistry / production company for a product. And that definitely helped to make sure that everything is secure and safe, and so are my customers if they ever come through.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. So first off, we're recording this on Saturday. I don't know if you're aware. I stay pretty tuned into the conspiracy culture, and Saturn kind of gets a bad rap. There's a whole black cube of Saturn theory. People worship the black cube of Saturn. Tell me from an alchemical lens the nature and the influences of Saturn and its kind of correspondence.
Yeah. I've seen a few of those too, especially recently, the black cube thing and 666 and all that. So I don't really follow or believe anything, but I know from an alchemical perspective, it would be kind of foolish to say that anything is actually bad. There is harmony and there is dissonance, and there is the appropriate time for both. Time to heal and a time to kill. It's even like a Bible verse. So Saturn, it's probably one of the most misunderstood archetypes, and that's how an alchemist would look at it. It's not just a planet. It's not, just the correspondence of lead in some sort of operation. It's an archetype that is alive within I. And when I say I mean the one conscious being, which is I, that creates the experience, which we would call the world. And then anyone is capable of saying this. Anyone is capable of recognizing their own existence all the way up to its most subtle and divine layer or level. And within your experience, anything that you do experience has to be a reflection of you. And if it isn't seen in that way, then alchemy is misunderstood, and you're just coming at it from a sense of belief. But that's never to be regarded within alchemy. They have that famous axiom, nullus in verba, take no man's word, right? Don't believe anyone, don't believe anything, and even those listening, don't even believe me. Go see for yourself. Follow nature, as they say. And in nature, Saturn exists as a planet. Lead exists, and it is an archetype within us. So I talk about this a bit on my website, and I have some planetary correspondence, like articles, and I talk about it with my planetary alignment set and how Saturn relates to the oil of lead and how that relates to the root chakra. And that like energetic center, or could even look at it from a physical standpoint with where the base of the spine and all the nerves go into that root ganglia and the adrenal cortex and all of the different physiological correspondences. That area, it often deals with the archetype of security. So the sense of security that one has in their self and in other, their environment, that's what this archetype is dealing with. And you can even distill that down to talk about the essence of security, and that has to do with fear. So I tend to notice that every major problem within and without, it comes down to fear. Fear of pain, fear of rejection, fear of being left out, right? You can just go on down the list forever. And that leads people to all kinds of things: anxiety, depression, paranoia, psychotic breakdowns, and violent or anger, any sort of action within those archetypes. And Saturn deals with that. And it's an important stepping stone, because you can't really go much further into the infinity of self, or especially not into the prima materia, unless you deal with your fear and go through it and gain courage, which is found in the heart. So I do see this in the world now, especially the conspiracy you mentioned, the black cube of Saturn stuff. And it isn't necessarily bad or wrong. Nothing is, right? Right and wrong do not exist. That is a opinion. That's a belief, and no belief is true. I won't say that it is essentially like loving or integral and virtuous if people really are, doing human sacrifice or beating children to get adrenochrome. Who's to say? Because I know I'm definitely not there to put eyes on it. But if that is happening, then that's going to cause pain, and that's going to cause suffering. And that's the flip side of Saturn. Saturn originally was a god of abundance and the harvest. You see pictures of Saturn holding a scythe, not because it's the Grim Reaper, because that's the tool that was used to cut down the chaff of wheat and to make the bread. So Saturn was always coming with a bounty, right? A beautiful harvest. And it was a god or an archetype that was all about abundance. And you need that abundance to go on to the next one, Jupiter, which was about fertility, creativity, and being creative in any sense, right? Co-creative or even procreative. And without that abundance, you can't have a fertility, because that's what fertility is, an abundance to create life, to create a connection, a relationship. And so if not to speak from my opinion would be that humans are confused, and they see this thing before them and they fear it because they fear themselves. And if they didn't, Saturn would be their best friend. Saturn would be their foundation for that sense of security, and it would be the security itself, so that you never have to fear and always have infinite abundance.
Wow, that's well said. I think that's a needed perspective. I was reading the alchemical analysis of the scorpion spagyric online on your website. It's pretty cool. You list out the content of things like the monoterpenes, sesquiterpenes, tetraterpenes, alcohols, the pyrols, the ketones. And it got me curious. I've heard of terpenes, as many people may have, in regards to things like cannabis, for example, but what exactly are terpenes and what kind of function do they have?
Yeah, I do my best with that website, and I have to say I don't really often have enough time to do as good as I wish, and I'm looking to change that, but it's a little battle every day. So I do try to list the science side of things so that people have more of a tangible understanding whenever I can. And I had totally forgotten I did that for scorpion, so that's cool that you noticed. But a terpene is a hydrocarbon, so hydrogen and carbon. And a common sort of chemical without the world, different plants and animals and everything, they rely on hydrocarbons. But if you ever go online and you look at an image of a hydrocarbon or a terpene, you'll see this backbone. And the most common backbone, it's called a benzene ring, and it looks like a hexagon. So you have these 6 carbons that come together to make this hexagon looking shape, and that's a benzene ring. Then each carbon will have a hydrogen attached to it, so it makes it a hydrocarbon. So that's like the most basic of hydrocarbons is the benzene ring. But then you have what are called substitutes. And each point of that hexagon is numbered 1 through 6. And you'll see this if you look at a chemical name sometimes, it will have like 1 ethyl, right? And it goes on with these numbers. The number is showing you where the other substitute is attaching. And the substitute is something other than a hydrogen. So for example, if you look at, a basic terpene like limonene, which you would find in cannabis, but it gets its name from limes, you would see that it has just one little substitute coming off of it with another hydrocarbon attachment. So those things, that's what a terpene is. It's a hydrocarbon that has an additional substitute, and they stay very simple. But then they go on, there's the primary, tertiary, sesquiterpene, like all kinds of different varieties of a terpene. And yes, they do have also a variety of different uses. So it can be kind of difficult to just put it under an umbrella. But essentially, if you were to look at it just as a chemical, right? Like just forget the name and just look at a terpene as a chemical thing. And a chemical is anything that is made out of an element or a compound. A compound has multiple elements coming together to create a chemical. Water is a chemical, air is a chemical. So these chemicals, your body has chemistry. It is made of chemicals, from, the membranes that make up your cells to the endorphins and, steroids of whatever, testosterone. These are chemicals. If you were to put a chemical into another, you change its chemistry. And most people are familiar when it comes to drugs, right? Think of taking acid or DMT. You put a chemical in your body and it changes the chemistry. It changes then the way you think and feel. So if you put a hydrocarbon, like an oil, like a terpene, inside of you, which you do all day, every day, everyone is. Coffee has oils, tea has oils, the food, the fruit, the vegetables, the meat, they all have oils. And you have these hydrocarbons coming in. And these things affect the chemistry of your body. When you affect that chemistry, it changes the function of your endocrine system. And it can even change your epigenetic factors and flip genes on and off and control the genetic expression of your code. So, but if you just go back to like the endocrine system, bring in a chemical like a terpene, it changes the chemistry. That changes the endocrine function. The endocrine system is in charge of your body's hormones and its chemical excretions. And that in turn changes the way you feel. If you feel differently, then you perceive differently. And now your reality has shifted. So we are familiar with this with drugs, like I said. Smoke some cannabis, take some acid, eat a mushroom. You'll know exactly what I mean. But try drinking a lot of water. It can get trippy. Try cleansing and, then drinking a soda pop and, oh my God, it feels like you're high. So people are familiar with this. They just don't often think of it. The function then gets determined by the substitutes, because that is going to determine what happens for the chemistry. Because it can be an acid or it could be a base. It can be positive or negative. It can affect one endocrine system more so than another. So it's kind of hard to say, and you just have to go on a case basis here.
Oh, that's fascinating. So I'm assuming like a monoterpene would mean like a single terpene, and like is tetra like 8, and
Exactly.
What is sesquiterpene?
7, I believe.
Oh, okay. Awesome. And then, so alcohols, I've heard of like ethyl alcohol and isopropyl alcohol for like putting on cuts or something like that. Yeah. But apparently there's all kinds of other forms of alcohol as well. What are the kind of differences between the different forms of alcohol?
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. You must have been looking at some chemistry lately, huh?
Yeah.
And it definitely makes sense too, because that's been a major talking point for many people. We have the pandemic going on, and everyone's trying to figure out like sanitizers and hand sanitizer and whatnot. And right now it's all about ethanol and isopropyl. Mm-hmm. So alcohol is a group, it's a chemical group. And within chemistry, like there's all kinds of groups. There's carboxylic acid, terpenes, aldehydes. And alcohol is one of those groups. So alcohol is not just what we drink. It's also used in organic synthesis. It's used for sanitation, for creating other compounds. If you were to, let's say you were to oxidize an alcohol, it would turn into an acid, a carboxylic acid, and then you have acetic acid, which is vinegar. So people look at alcohols as there's primary, secondary, and tertiary. I think there's 3 groups. There might be some more. And this really has to do with kind of the way the hydroxyl, so that's a hydrogen and oxygen, click in. So depending on how it clicks into your compound, that changes it, and it makes it not really human grade, right? So we all know that ethanol is what we drink, ethyl alcohol, and that will produce a beer or a wine. But there's also other alcohols in there, and some people call them fusel oils or fusel alcohols. And those alcohols can give something its unique flavor, scent, and so on. But in certain quantities, they can be toxic. And that's not exactly what we want to do. So knowing about that is what determines how it will affect the system or the environment. And they can be made in a variety of ways. Fermentation is one way. That usually produces the primary ethanol alcohol that we can consume. But fermentation can also produce methanol. It can also produce different fusel alcohols. And sometimes that's not really good. Mm-hmm. So you can also then synthesize alcohols. And that's how isopropyl is made. Isopropyl is often made from synthesis of petroleum byproducts. And when they synthesize something, if you know what you're doing, you can synthesize it to be 99% pure. So you can make it to be very, very clean, and you don't have to do anything more to it. And that's actually an issue right now, at least within the United States. I'm not sure about other countries, but alcohol is extremely needed for an antiseptic and to clean the systems. And it's hard to find. At least it's hard to find good quality too.
Wow. And then pyrols, that's one I actually have never even heard of. What is a pyrrole?
So that's going to have nitrogen in it.
Okay.
And that a nitrogen containing compound, that's when you get an alkaloid. And pyrroles are unique because they're not that hexagon. They're actually more of a pentagon shape. And so you have 4 carbons and then 1 nitrogen. Usually it's drawn with the nitrogen at the top point of the pentagon. And then it has all the hydrogens coming off of it. So that, I think it's called an indole. Yeah, an indole is when you see that pentagon shape attached to the hexagon benzene ring. And the most simple of indoles, I think it's literally called indole. It's like this terrible smelling, like fishy odor. They use it for fly deterrents or traps. But anything that has a nitrogen containing compound, it can be used as by the body for all kinds of things, but the most often are called alkaloids. And nitrogen-containing compounds like alkaloids are neurotransmitters. This is why alkaloids make people trip or make you feel a certain way. You know, you have a lot of dopamine and it rushes through your body and you feel good and you feel happy and strong and excited, right? You feel, if you get serotonin coming through, then you're going to feel all this like more of the lovey sort of emotional goodness. So these nitrogen containing compounds like pyrrole or alkaloids, they will affect the nervous system and they will send a message through. And that can change your emotion, which also can change the function of your body. It can tell certain organs, endocrine systems, you know, like electrical variants across the body, what is what and what's going on. It's the messenger, and it changes everything. And it's wonderful because you can use it for medicinal or spiritual use, you know, physically, mentally, and emotionally across the board. And that's really, really cool for people. So understanding how those work, which is a massive science, like this is, we're talking like details of organic chemistry now. It can be used very intentionally and very eloquently, I would say. It's an art, and people often forget that, which is why most alchemists will say that chemistry is dead. But I would disagree. I don't think it's dead. I think it just is misunderstood, just like alchemy is. So if alchemists think chemistry is dead, then those alchemists are dead too. And they're dead to me, that's for sure. Because you cannot restrict anything within your reality and be called an alchemist, at least not a very good one. It means you don't understand. You don't understand who you are, and you're missing the primary point, which, you know, I talk about it all the time, even in that last podcast we did, how alchemy is the is the understanding of consciousness to matter. And if you understand how consciousness and matter are linked, then you understand that the consciousness within the observer, I am the one that is seeing, feeling, hearing, creating, all of it. It's my dream. Therefore, it is of me. And if it's of me, why would I ever hurt myself? Why would I be afraid of myself? Why would I do anything that is backwards and dissonant? Well, I wouldn't. So as soon as you can hold that perspective and look out at the world and see it as your reflection, which is what it truly is, and you're not even looking out, you're looking in when you look out with your eyes. That's what the inside of you looks like. And that inside, if you don't agree with it, and you need to face it and question, is this thing I am perceiving me? And do I even know what I am? And am I like this? Am I, you know, toxic? Am I poisonous? Am I full of fear, doubt, worry? Am I a killer? Like, what is this? And something really beautiful happens when you begin to do that, when you truly know who you are, is that thing in front of you, that reflection. If it is not I, it will go away in one of two ways. It will literally exit the scene and it will not come back if you know who you are, or it will transform before your eyes, truly. And that is the challenge of the world is asleep to who they are. They're lost and they're forgotten. And it's not that hard to simply just go back within and look and ask yourself, what do I know for certain and what is true? Can I trust my eyes? Can I trust what's on that screen? Can I trust what I'm hearing? And the answer is no, you can't. But you can trust one thing. You can trust that you are experiencing something, and you're definitely watching, hearing, feeling, whatever, but you can't say for certain it's real. And that's really odd, I think, for people. And if you can even allow yourself to go there within an internal dialogue, it's very beneficial, if not like the only true medicine that can transform anything, is self-awareness. So I know I'm kind of off the topic of chemistry and pyrroles and such, but
I think that's definitely relevant for these chaotic times.
yeah, I would agree, actually.
And in ketones, I think many people are familiar with those now as they relate to like the ketogenic diet. They're somewhat of a clean energy source. Is there any other interesting characteristics of ketones that we could be aware of?
I mean, there's so many things. Like ketogenic diet is really cool because yes, it's like a mitochondrial food, but it can also, you can be a poison if you have ketoacidosis, like you would experience with a diabetic or someone that's in a ketogenic diet and just like doesn't know what they're doing. And that's when you get that kind of body odor, the fruity body odor. So ketones are wonderful because they are such a simple molecule. You know, it's essentially an oxygen bound to whatever, an extra oxygen. And by adding that ketone, you add a quality to that compound that it once did not have. It now can be used or associated with others to kind of be a medium for reactions and or fuel in a way, right? Like the ketone is still a spirit from the alchemical perspective, and they will burn. So think of it like fire or like fuel. And when placed appropriately, that fuel is extremely beneficial. Like obviously in a vehicle, you put the fuel in the fuel tank. You don't pour it into the trunk or into the driver's seat.
Right.
Put it where it needs to go. So it's hard to define simply when we're getting into chemicals and the good and the bad, because I don't see or believe that. It's more so, how is this thing most efficiently placed? And the answer is there's an infinite amount of answers. It comes down to what you want. And I never have repeated a message so many times before, but I repeat this message every single day of my life, and I repeat it probably hundreds of times. What do you want? What you want determines what you do, because there is no right and there is no wrong for anything, especially chemistry. If you want a poison, a ketone could be it. If you want a supplement, a ketone could be it. If you want a ATP activating whatever for energy, sure, a ketone could be that too. It could be a solvent. It could be a medium. It could be a aroma. If you want it to smell good, it could be a flavor. What do you want? And that determines it. So, and that's true for all chemicals, just like the alcohols and the acids of different, qualities. And even the terpenes that are inside of the cannabis. Different levels of different terpenes will determine what that cannabis looks like, feels like, smells like, and does within a body. If you have a cannabis that's extremely low in pinene, well, if that person isn't mentally sound, they're going to get a bunch of paranoia. You increase the pinene, the paranoia goes away. If you have too high of THC but too low of limonene, well, that high is going to be super intense. And it's also going to deregulate a lot of neuro receptors and gray matter within your brain. So it's the way it's used.
Wow. So are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, okay, sorry. You produce a product called the Quintessence of honey. Is there a difference between the essence of something and the quintessence? And if so, how are they different?
Yeah, so quint, right? Like quintessence is 5. We know of the traditional 4 elements, earth, air, water, fire. And then most people are also now familiar with the Chinese systems, and they have 5 elements. And the quintessence is that 5th element. So the quintessence is the central. It's the one that is found when all 4 are present. And then once the 4 are there, then you get the 5th. So the 5th is the wholeness. It's the root, or the absolute like center. The essence of something is just one of its principles. So in alchemy, we call the essence the soul, or the sulfur. And in a physical sense, it's the oil. But that oil, if you were to capture it from a plant or something, that would be its essence, its isness, its beingness that holds all of its medicine, flavor, scent, its ability for being what it is. And that essence can then come together with the other 3 principles, its spirit and its body, and recombined, you get the spagyric. But each essence has the elements. And I know alchemists often look at it differently. They say that, the sulfur, the soul, the essence is fire, whereas the mercury is it's air and it's water. And then the earth or the salt is the water, or it's the earth. So most alchemists do not see all four elements within these different things, soul, spirit, and body. But I would disagree. That doesn't make sense. You have to have all four elements always if there is ever going to be a physical representation, which those things do have. An essence or an oil exists, a spirit or an alcohol exists before you, right? A salt, that exists. It has to have all four. So once you have all four, you have a complete material object or thing, and that's their quintessence. So a spirit, or sorry, not a spirit, a spagyric could be called a quintessence. And people get this confused all the time. They're like, so what's the difference between a quintessence or a spagyric? And it's like, well, technically there isn't one. Everything is quintessential. Every object would have and be a quintessence. And once you begin to see that and understand that, it actually allows for much more diversity with the item or material that's in front of you. And that's where the art comes in. And you get to answer those questions really effectively, like the one I just brought up, what do you want? That's the question no one ever considers. They just want, when they ask questions, they leave it broad and they leave it ambiguous. And that's to their own detriment. Whenever we leave anything ambiguous, we create manipulation or hypnotic trances for ourselves or for others. And this is also a major problem in the world because everybody assumes. An assumption is made upon belief, and belief is not true. Only the truth is true. Belief is an opinion, and an opinion is relative, and the truth is not. So as people go forward and they think and they ask questions and they explore and they research, they assume too often. And that assumption, if you place it enough and with anything, then you create an illusion and you fool yourself or you fool another. To do it intentionally is called NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And this is like 99% of all humans I have ever met. They do this unconsciously. They hypnotize themselves by not defining the fact or the definition in general. And I know this seems off topic to the question, of course, but it's not, because we're talking about the wholeness, right? The quintessence, the fifth element. That fifth element is its being, and all the other four elements around it and the principles that make them, that is the archetypical, foundational, just beingness of I. So you will always find it present in all things because I am present, therefore the world is present. So going back to that second thought, though, the NLP manipulation thought, think about this for a second. So there's a framework to how communication works, or I guess you could say there are principles, just like there are to any material or to any sort of abstract thought. There's a principle. There's three of them, actually, just like alchemy. In alchemy, we have the sulfur, mercury, and salt, and that's a code language. So that sulfur, mercury, and salt, or the symbol that goes with it, that can be used infinitely. It's an infinite translation device for the way in which all experiences are generated. Whether it's a thought or a physical experience, it doesn't matter. Everything is bound within three principles or foundational truths, including communication. So the three for communication, if they are ever left out, you will have a dissonant belief system that is not rooted into truth and therefore will lead you or an other or the mind astray to go down a path of death or a hell-like experience, which is what we are watching in the world, or so we think. So these three things have to be regarded at all times if communication is ever going to work. Otherwise, it will fall apart and crumble and create miscommunication and confusion or belief. So the three things. The first one, it's called generalization. If you ever generalize something within a communication, written or spoken, then you leave it open for interpretation. So to give you an example, it would be like, oh, hey, Avery, what did you do today? And I said, oh, I went out. Well, that's pretty general, right? Oh, I went out. Where did you go out? Oh, I just went out down the way a couple blocks to check some stuff out. Okay, does that tell you anything? No, not really. It tells you I went out somewhere, cool, but where, but why, how, the who, what, when, where, why is not regarded. And when people disregard quintessence or get it wrong, they're doing this. So this is going to come full circle in a second. So the first one of communication, first principle of communication, generalization. If you ever generalize something, then you are leaving it open for interpretation, which means miscommunication, or you're leading that person to assume they know what you mean, and you have just caused them to sin, so to speak. To miss the mark is what that word means. So you don't do that. Not you, but like royal you here, right?
Right.
I'm speaking to the audience. So that's number one, generalization. Second principle is distortion, to distort the facts or what happened. And people do this all the time. They don't even realize it. Most of this is actually unconscious, and it's unconscious because of fear, right? Back to Saturn, right? They're afraid of what people will think, that they'll say too much, that they'll be looked at as crazy. There's so many fears. People are full of fear. They're just a walking little flesh bag of fear. So first is generalization. The second one is distortion. Don't distort the facts. Don't warp it to be what you think the individual wants to hear. And don't even do it for yourself. And this is really hard for people because when they look out at the world, they see things that they like and don't like. And the things they like are what make them comfortable. And there's also belief and expectation of what should make you comfortable. And usually it's very easy to see within relationships. So my family, right? My family should be my comfort zone. My home should be my comfort zone. My relationships that I have within my home, girlfriends, wives, boyfriends, husbands, children, moms, dads, whatever. So people will distort facts because it's coming from someone they want to feel comfortable with and trust. And this is absolute insanity. If your brother came to you and he says, like, hey, I really want to go to the park with you and I just want to, I don't know, hang out, walk around and do some stuff. So some stuff, well, that's generalization. And then you guys go out and you don't go to the park, you go to a parking lot or something, right? Like it's the distorted facts. And he's actually taking you somewhere to meet your ex-girlfriend who's been trying to call you, but you wouldn't pick up the phone for her. And you just got fucking like basically manipulated into a situation you don't want to be in. Well, that's shitty. You don't want to do that, right? And that's kind of messed up of your brother to do that to you too. And I'm just making these things up, right? But that's an example of how a distortion or a generalization can lead you into a situation you don't want to necessarily be in. So people do this all day, every day, and they lead themselves into situations that then make them feel uncomfortable and then suffer, and then they become a victim and they blame and they point fingers. But really it's their own fault for not asking the right questions or speaking and communicating appropriately. That's why it begins to happen. So number one is generalization. Second principle is distortion. Third principle is omission, to omit a fact when it should be placed there. If you, and you've heard the saying, to lie by omission. Mm-hmm. If you can lie by omission. I didn't lie, I just didn't tell him the whole story. Yeah, well, you omitted the fact, and that pisses people off. You don't do that. So the quintessence is something that is often omitted. And if you go back and look at the history of the four elements, you see how the quintessence, some people call it ether, aether, and we omit that. We don't look at that within science. We have four basic building blocks to an organic life form: hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. Where's the fifth? What's up with that? Or we look at the laws of the universe, the physical forces of the universe: weak nuclear force, strong nuclear force, electromagnetism, and gravity. Where's the fifth? What's up? Why is this omitted? That's why people are insane, is that there is a truth that is not being told. And I am the one to tell it. And anybody can say that if they follow this as a guide. And they will find that this thing is written into all things because this is universal, it's archetypical, it is the nature of infinity, and it is the framework of truth. And it is infinitely translatable. And that's what alchemy is for. Like I see it as a technology. Well, it's all things, but one awesome way to look at it is as a technology. It is a language as well, a philosophy, an art, a way, and it's everything. But when you use it like a technology, I like to use it like an infinite translation device to translate the inside to the outside and vice versa, and to bridge the gap through communication. Communication is not just words. People forget that the greatest part of communication is listening. And if you truly listen, you don't just listen with your ears, you listen with your heart. You watch, you look, you feel, you pay attention to your thoughts and your intuitions, smells, the temperatures, the weather, the birds outside, the body language of a person as they're speaking to you, the context that they are using within those words, the omissions of certain things or the generalizations that would otherwise cause your mind to fall into a little trap or a pocket of assumption, and that would make you believe and lead you astray. Communicating is listening, truly. And when we learn to do that, and when we learn to correspond using alchemy, we have then gathered that infinite translation device. We have gained the only true technology that exists. And we have also found that that same device is a compass and a map at the same time. It is a way in which we can navigate through infinity and set sail to the experiences that most resemble us or I, that have truth and virtue. And that's where the quintessence is. That quintessence is within, and it is I. It is the central factor that unifies the four. And that is the thing that is aware of it. And it can only be I. It cannot be anything else. And so if you find that within anything, then you have found the truth once again. And the cycle can repeat. And you found the central point to life, the point at which the trunk of the root of the tree of life is grounded and then rooted into the unknown. And that is truly magnificent to discover, to see, and to climb up and down. And I would only hope that every human who chooses to make it through to exist beyond whatever's going on, they will get to see that it's an absolute truth. There's no option there. And that's really beautiful as well. And I understand just how magnificent and grateful I and the other will be when that happens.
Wow, definitely. That's pretty well said. When you're doing something like heating crystals in a heating flask and they crack open and release a fume, is a fume synonymous with a vapor? Because when I go to the definition for fume, it says gas, smoke, or vapor. And on that note, I'm just curious your thoughts in regards to things like vape pens from an alchemical perspective. Is there a preferred method of ingesting things like cannabis, for example, with a vape pen versus something like a pre-roll? What are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, a fume doesn't have to be a vapor, so to speak. Like the easiest vapor to understand would be like a cloud. We see a cloud, we see water, steam. Steam is a vapor, and it's something that's being diffused into the air. That's usually once liquid or solid. So you're having little particles, little elements or compounds that turn into a cloud. It's usually quite visible when we see vapor. Fume, well, that could be a gas fume, which you can't see. Right? If you smell natural gas and there's a gas leak, well, that's a fume. So it's a gas that has diffused into the area that is naturally a, sort of light, invisible element or compound. So it can get kind of slippery with the language, but that's usually how I see it. And like a vape pen, well, that produces vapor. It takes whatever is the substance or the medium, the glycerol or propylene glycol or whatever people use in different versions, and it superheats it, right? And it just, bam, turns into a little vapor cloud along with any terpenes and THC and molecules that go with it. and you inhale it. And people like that, as I'm sure you know. It goes straight to the lungs, which means straight to the bloodstream. What do your lungs do? Well, the little air packets that absorb the oxygen out of the air and capture it with red blood cells, which have the iron, and iron is very easily oxidized, and it carries that oxygen all through the system so that every cell can have respiration and continue to produce ATP and do whatever it needs to do. So vapors are really effective in that way to get something direct into the bloodstream. And they're often liquids or solids, but usually liquids that are superheated to go to the next phase, which is a gas phase, a vapor phase. Yeah, that's I guess really all I can say to that.
Okay, and then so say like a vapor versus smoking. Like if you're to ingest the smoke, how does the smoke differ, or does it?
I mean, I think it's still a vapor because, like even a cigarette or a pre-roll, it's still taking something and heating it with a fire. I mean, whether it's an electrical fire or actual flame fire, it's still fire, and it's heating it to that next phase, and then you inhale the smoke. The only thing is that with that, because it's crude, right? It's like a tobacco or a weed or whatever. It has other compounds, but when you distill down an oil and you have essential oils or cannabis oils, and that goes into a different sort of medium, well, that's much cleaner and purer and less carbon and carcinogen, and that's why people like it. It also doesn't create all of that excess burning smell of the smoke, which then sticks into the carpet and the furniture and your clothes and your breath, and it just can be kind of nasty. So
okay,
it's not better or worse, right? As always, it's just what do you want? Because you also get certain things that you wouldn't get if you were to smoke a real herb. If you only had the essential oil, well, that could leave some stuff behind, and maybe you don't want that stuff left behind. I don't know. It's just what you want. So I love herbs. I love all kinds of different herbs to be vaped and smoked, not even just cannabis or tobacco. Like those herbs are whatever to me, honestly. Like people have such an addiction to what they see on Facebook and on the media, and they're missing out on the infinity that is life and all of the other herbs that are so much more enjoyable than those two. And I am all about it. Like no fear of saying that. Of smoking a variety of herbs that I wild harvest myself or I buy, and blending them and extracting them, getting their oils, vaping them. These are medicines, and these are tools. These are reflections of my own infinity, and they're ways in which I can know myself or even modulate my experience so that I can have the dream that I most prefer in that moment. And how wonderful is that? And if the world knew of its ability to do that as well, and could do so in the virtuous ways where it's not a massive industry where just like corn, where we monocrop the shit out of some fields, now they're doing it with hemp and cannabis because people want that cash crop. Like how ridiculous. I have nothing against weed, but I do not like the cannabis industry whatsoever. Like if people could recognize that what you have growing in your backyard could be just as enjoyable, that there are other plants that have endocannabinoids within themselves that can make you feel just like you're smoking weed, and that you didn't have to grow a massive thing or go through a bunch of legislation to buy it or be over 18, but you just went around the corner to that dirt lot and found an herb growing like a weed that no one paid attention to. Yeah, that's what's up.
wow. Now,
That's true freedom.
on that note, what are some of those that are more common herbs that one would find?
I'll leave that to the individual to figure out, because I think that's where that somebody needs to go and start to build a relationship with themselves and their environment. Go get a plant identification book. Go check it out. Go see what's going on. And I'll give a hint though. Anytime you study herbalism or wild crafting and you come across something that's labeled as poisonous, you found your pathway, because, and it doesn't always have to be poisonous. Don't make that a strict law. But within the herbal world, and herbalists who basically are just echo chambers of whatever their teacher taught them, which their teacher taught them, and, just go on down the list forever to some delusional person that didn't have all of the answers. Well, they are taught and believe, oh, no, don't touch that one. That one's poisonous. No, bullshit. Look at it. It's not actually poisonous. It just means it should be respected. It means that you should give it more attention and look at it. Why should I be afraid of anything that is I, right? Why should this plant scare me? It scares me because I don't know. I don't know what will happen if I smoke it, if I drink it, if I put it into my food. Well, get to know it, study it, learn about it, get every little single piece of information and figure out why people are afraid of it. What does it have? What is it made out of? Where does it grow? What color is it? What sort of environments does it like, right? What does it smell like? So all of these things are symbols and they're messages. This is communication once again. Greatest part is listening. If you can listen with every faculty you have, then you'll hear, so to speak, right? Eyes to see, ears to hear. That's how God talks to us. It's written everywhere. So I'll give you an example though of one I have enjoyed recently. Out here in New Mexico, I'm in the mountains, and we get all 4 seasons. It snows in the winter, the leaves turn gold in the fall, and now it's spring going into summer. So, or it probably is summer by now. But here, there's creeks, there's rivers, lakes, there's forests, there's meadows, and all kinds of stuff. And so there's a wide variety of plants, and everything you could ever imagine. It's wonderful. But right outside my house, around kind of in this like area that no one ever gets to look at or see, and you never go to, because there's all these bushes in the way, these massive sagebrush bushes. There's a small little patch, and it's totally just dry sand. And it looks like a shitty place for any plant that would want to grow. But there's a plant, it's about, I don't know, foot high, maybe, has that sage green color, and this big white flower, kind of floppy, sort of flowery petals. And I believe it has 6 petals, if I remember correctly, and a dark black center. And it kind of looks like an evening primrose. The flower kind of looks like that. And it drops all these little tiny black seeds all over the place. And every single part of this plant, except the floppy little flower petal, is loaded with those tiny little spikes like on a cactus that you almost can't even see, little hair-like spikes that are barbed. Yeah, every single part of this plant. And if you touch it, you'll know immediately. This thing will poke you and it gets stuck in your finger because it's barbed and it's super annoying. But if you cut it, it will bleed a white latex sort of sap. And if you chop it all up and mix it all together and do your best to not get your fingers poked, wear gloves or something, I don't know, and smoke it, it's better than weed. It's like infinitely better. And it's called a prickly poppy. So it's a weed. People hate it, prickly poppy. And out here, no one even pays attention. It only grows in the gutters, in the dry patches, and the fields that get neglected. It gets into all the nooks and crannies of where humans don't put their eye. And that's where the magic happens. It's in the place that you cannot see. It's behind the veil, right? This thing is not behind a veil. It's just right out in the open, but it's behind the veil of human perception because they just see a weed. So it's been a favorite of mine, and it's pretty common in the Mexican culture. They have Mexican prickly poppies, and it's been related to opium in a way. I don't feel it's anything like opium, but it's more like cannabis, and it's wonderful, and it's extremely medicinal, takes away pain, and does all the wonderful things that cannabis can do, and then more. And so that's just an example, and I can go on and on and on and on about every little plant that's on the planet, but I would encourage people to go look for themselves and to ask the right questions. And wherever there's a no, to figure out why they have the no, or even why society or the culture around them has that no, because that is the collective delusion that needs to be questioned. And if you do, you will find the greatest of allies in whatever no you question, and you will find a way to place it or to dissolve it away from your reality forever without being resistant, but simply by asking it what it is and how it functions and why it's here, because it does have a purpose, and the purpose will forever be self-defined. So keep that in mind, but it has a purpose for existing because it exists within your awareness as a symbol of some aspect of self, either a delusional aspect or an archetypical one. And if you can find the archetype in all things, that's the key to unlock reality. And then living gets fun and exciting and fast. And it's awesome.
Thank you for that. Now, ENS tinctures. What is it that separates an ENS tincture from like a regular tincture?
Yeah, ENSs are awesome. So Paracelsus made the ENS, he made the ENS popular. And he talked about ENS, that word, it means entity. He talked about the ENS of anything. It's entity, it's spirit, it's like invisible nature that was closely connected to nature or to God, which are like one and the same. And so when he talked about ENSs, he said there was 5. And each ENS was one of the things that caused disease or death within man. So he named them as the ENS of astrology. So the stars can affect your health, then this is mental, emotional, physical, right? The ENS of astrology. There's the ENS of nature. Nature can hurt you. The ENS, it's called ENS veneni, it means poison, a poison or a toxin. You can drink bleach and it will hurt you, right? Don't do that. ENS spiritual, which spirit is the mind, so your mind can create disease. And then the final one, which he said was the ENS of all ENSs and was the ultimate say of any and all things and the health and wellness of any human. It was the ENS dia, the ENS of God, and that no one could get away from this ENS. And so that's what the ENS was about. It was about extracting the ENS dia from anything. And what that means, this is where people get confused, and there's all this crazy, wonderful, fluffy stories within alchemy and alchemists today, of extracting these like insane things. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? And science thinks it's totally whack because it sounds weird to be like, yeah, I'm extracting the entity of God out of my rosemary today. That's a little weird. No, what that means is when you do the ENS, you would only know this if you were into lab work and had alchemy and chemistry. When you do an ENS, you do what's called a straight to base extraction. So you're using a basic solution, something of a pH of like 11 or 12. And that solution is then used as a secret fire. So because it's so basic, like think of touching lye, it will burn you. And it's like a fire, it's like a chemical fire. So it's called a secret fire. And so if you were to extract something with a secret fire rather than a vulgar fire, which is just like a flame, like you would within common distillation, then you will get these secret invisible sort of substances, like an ENS. So an ENS does a straight to base. It uses a very basic solution. The herb goes into that solution, and then you have what's called a vegetable magnet, it's essentially a highly, highly refined, dried spirit. Has no water within it whatsoever. 200 proof alcohol. And that will float on top of the solution if you do it right. And what happens is that has a little bit of a charge. That alcohol has a little bit of a charge, and it causes different compounds that are magnetically attracted to it to literally rise up out of the solution and into the alcohol or the spirit, the vegetable magnet. And that attracts what we were talking about earlier, alkaloids. It attracts nitrogen-containing compounds, and it pulls them into itself and it extracts it out of the plant. Well, like I said before, an alkaloid is like a neurotransmitter. It can click in, it can be an agonist or an antagonist. It can replace agonist or block antagonist, a neuroreceptor site for a different neurotransmitter. And then that can modulate the nervous system and the signals that are going throughout the body. So just like I mentioned with those alkaloids, the most common, or usually people are most familiar with alkaloids as drugs, tryptamines, right? Phenylethylamines, T-col, P-col, if anyone's ever read those books, I'll wink to you. Then, we know them through acid, DMT, mushrooms, mescaline, all that kind of stuff. Those are alkaloids. Those are enses. Those are the entity of God. It's why those substances are called entheogenic, right? God within. It's like, it's all the same. So when Paracelsus was extracting an ens and doing a straight to base, he was essentially making drugs. And he would take them and he would trip and he would think that God was within. And it makes actual perfect sense, because who is God, right? What and who is God? What is it like? When Moses speaks to the burning bush in the book of Exodus, and the burning bush tells him to go, free the Israelites and do all the whole Exodus story, he asks he asks the burning bush, well, who do I tell them that sent me? Like, well, they're never going to believe the story, right? Who do I say sent me? What is your name? And what did the bush say? It said, I am that I am. That's the name. That's the name of God. So when people ask or wonder or ponder upon, well, who is God? I am. It's that easy. And what do I mean when I say that I am? That is showing you that I am aware that I exist. Awareness aware of itself. I am that I am. That's all it is. It's that simple. That's what an entheogen does. If anyone has ever taken one, you take acid or mushrooms, right? What happens? You trip. And then you see whatever, you do whatever, you feel whatever, right? Like, oh my God, the colors, and like, it was like geometry in my mind. And people have like crazy elf stories, and they get super identified with them. And that's their own delusion once again. So what they're seeing is their crazy mind. If they were paying attention, they would see that everything changes constantly, especially if you take a ton of acid. It can get real scary and people can have bad trips because they don't understand what's happening and where they are or who they are. And that's the problem. They don't understand who they are. They cannot say that I am, because the greatest tool, or I guess I would say the greatest lesson of that tool, is to take any substance, any drug, blast off with DMT, trip balls on acid, whatever. Everything will change. Everything will warp. The walls will melt. You can get flushed down the toilet of reality into some other physical experience. You can be walking with Osiris himself in like this bright world of, I don't know, Shangri-La. Who knows where you go on your trips? But there's one thing that doesn't change. The awareness is always there, and it's always the same. And it's just watching. It's just observing. It's observing some new scene, some new feeling, some crazy colors, how everything merged into one and became a new thing. That's it. That's all a drug can ever do to you, is show you the intricacies of the infinity of your own mind. And that's when it shows you the entity of God. And that's what I am. And people forget that, and they get identified. Like, I'm just going to rant here a little bit more. So everybody that, it's impossible to get away from this conversation, right? Last time we were having a podcast, we talked about this stuff too. Every single person I talk to every day, this is what we talk about. Every party you ever go to, what do people talk about? Sex and drugs. Like, it's what everyone is interested in. Who's fucking who, and what drugs have you taken? And it goes around and around and around. Or they talk about all the victim mentality stuff that they have and why the government is like a conspiracy and blah, blah, blah. Like, who cares? Seriously, who cares? Well, obviously they do, because they keep talking about it, whoever they are, but that's not the point. Like, people are missing it. So if everybody would just like stop and look at it for a second, no one ever needs to go looking for anything ever. Don't ever read a Terence McKenna book in your life. Don't ever get into Aleister Crowley and tarot and all that bullshit. I'm not saying it's wrong or that it's bad. I have all those things on my shelf too. I pulled a tarot card this morning. Like, it doesn't matter. But don't do it thinking that it has anything that you need, because it doesn't. Whatever it is, it doesn't even exist. It's an illusion. It is not what you think it is. It is a part of you. If it's not I, if you can't see that, hear that, feel that, know that, then you need to figure out a way to get to that place very quickly. Otherwise, you are fooling yourself. You don't need to do a drug. You don't need the supplement. You don't need a perfect diet. You don't need to not eat the McDonald's burger or eat it. You don't need anything. That's the true secret of life, because life just exists. It's just here, just as I am here. Like, I didn't ask to be here. I am just here, right? Did you try to, come here? Did you like consciously choose to be born? No, consciously you did not. You are unconscious of that fact. And the people that argue, oh, I chose my life path and lessons and I reincarnated into this family so I can suffer for my karma. Yeah, you should suffer for that karma because you're delusional, and you will, and you are, and that is earned. You earn that if you think that way. You deserve exactly what you get. You reap what you sow. Right back to Saturn. What does Saturn hold? A scythe and a bundle of wheat. He's the reaper. You reap what you sow. And if people sow delusion, they get a crazy, chaotic, delusional world full of fear, pain, suffering. And that's what they have, because that's what they've done. Because they are too unaware of the simple things in life, which is that I exist. And right now I exist in a house that's very comfortable. Actually, there's food in the fridge. There's water out of the tap. That's not going to kill me. There's no one beating down my door. If I exist in a city, well, then that was my choice. If I choose to stay there, then that's my choice. If, I ended up here as a victim to it because I didn't ask to be born and I can't leave because I'm not old enough or whatever, I don't have money in a car, then I feel sorry for those people, because I truly understand that they are stuck within a world that they did not create, and they are I. And that is the I that I would hope to see gains its rightful place in the world. Like, I'm not even religious. I quote the Bible a lot, but I'm not religious or believe in anything. But I think it's interesting that it says that the meek will inherit the earth. It's those people that actually don't have a choice. And if they did, they would change it. And those meek are everywhere. I was one once before too, growing up on the streets alone and being homeless and having to make my way from the bottom to the top. And that's why I give and give and give and give. I do not take. I do not ask anyone of anything ever. I don't care. I don't need it. I don't want it. And it's that I can go right back into this one too, because this is very important. It's that it's impossible to move ahead in any direction if people are taking. I'm not saying receive. There's nothing wrong with receiving, right? If someone gives you something or you're experiencing something, definitely take it. Like, you do not do anything about it, just receive. But when it comes to your own words, thoughts, and actions, especially actions and words, don't be a taker, because that's what continues to breed more of the same patterns we have seen. For example, like I'm sure most people know now, because conspiracies are a real hot item, but this isn't even a conspiracy. The Federal Reserve that owns our monetary system, right? Every dollar bill that gets printed or put into your bank account through some virtual digital number that says that you have wealth, that dollar bill is seeded with debt. Every dollar bill, as I'm sure most people know, that is given to the government to then distribute as wealth across the nation, they owe the Federal Reserve an interest on that dollar bill. That means that that dollar bill has a debt behind it. It is a contract. You contract yourself when you take that and you use it and you believe in it, and it defines you and limits your decisions. You are contracted into debt, into lack. That is called lack mentality, and everybody gets super pissed when anyone ever brings it up, but that's truth. Like, go look it up for yourself. Go do your own research. That's where the conspiracies come from. That's why there's a giant I on the back of the dollar bill, because I am the one, right, that is watching that thing and that system. And they don't need money. I don't need money, right? No one does. And why would you contract yourself to that thing? That's taking. So when the world then runs off of money, and the industries that make products that go to the shelf that the civilians buy and use as their cleaning materials and foods and, you know, baby formulas and whatever people buy at grocery stores. I don't even know. I haven't been to one in forever. Those things are taking, and you're taking, and it's taking from you, your body, your mind, but mostly the environment. Where does all that paper come from? How is all of this ethanol for hand sanitizer made anyways? Was it made from corn? Was it made, what's in that package? Is it a bunch of high fructose corn syrup? What did we take to grow all that corn? Did we take the forest? Did we take good clean water and air? Well, we had to build the truck to get it from point A to point B, right? What did that take? What metal, what rubber, what fuel, what hydrocarbons that are oil inside of the ground? What did we take to make that happen so that you can go and get a pack of M&Ms at the gas station around the corner? That's taking, and that's insane. And that's us, like, it's everywhere within, it is our world, literally. Our world is insane. We live in an insane asylum called Earth. It sucks. I fucking hate it, actually. But I'm also here to be an embodiment or a light or a guide or a helper, or I don't even know, and who cares, define me as whatever you want, but to show and tell people the absolute truth in every possible way it can be explained and translated. So with that in mind, what would be the reverse of that? Giving, giving, giving. And because people will argue this in their minds. Everything I say always has an argument behind it, and I know how to diffuse every single one. And if it came to me, I would diffuse it instantly, and that person would be my best friend, just as everyone else has ever done. Or they would go away silently and never speak to me again because it hurt their pride too much. But what's the opposite? What's a giver as opposed to a taker? And anyone who's read Ishmael is going to know immediately what I'm talking about, but I'm not even referring to Ishmael. That guy just wrote a good book about this. So giving, do the contrast. So if you were to give, well, it doesn't mean you just like give everything you have and you just get taken advantage of. No, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with love. And this is one of my all-time favorite things to talk about. This is the point. Literally, it's that same point we got to earlier, the quintessence, the central point from which life exists and roots itself into, going above and below in every direction. Love is that point. I, love, life, nature, soul, God, essence, those are all the same thing. That's a synonym, right? Same concept, different word to describe it. That's how the infinite translation device works. That's the sulfur of the alchemist. That's the symbol of my website, Kymia Arts, sulfur. That's what it is. But love, that's the greatest. And I like to define this because people get it confused. They like to project all over love, just as everyone likes to project all over me. And any other thing, people like to project all over Earth and nature, and everyone loves to project because it's all they know how to do, is how to believe that it is something that it is not. So if you go and look up the etymology of love, you'll see that it has a root word. It's called leaf. It's where we get our word leave. Leave and love are the same. They mean the same thing, to leave be. So to love something, if you truly actually do love something, you leave it to be as it is. You don't touch it. You just leave it. You don't try to change it. You don't tell it it's good or bad, wrong or right. You don't tell it it needs to change. It just is what it is. The tree, the flower, the river, the ocean, the person. Just leave it to be as it is. If it chooses to hurt itself, it hurts itself. If it hurts you, it hurts you. So be it. Leave that pain to be as it is. If it is confused, you can encourage it. You can give, right, to it, but not force it. Whatever it is, once again, you just leave it. So if the world, if people were left to be as they are, and this is the greatest and hardest of this point with love, the thing that is missed here, it's easy to leave things to be as they are. And there's a lot of questions that come from this all the time, and I understand because no one knows what's up. But the hardest part is to leave yourself to be as you are. And no one ever seems to think of this or to do it as much as people think they do. Just if you take a moment to consider who you are, first who you are at the highest level, which would be divine, and it would be truth and life itself. But then to go down to the individual, and at the individual level, everything is relative. There is no right and wrong. It's whatever you perceive and believe or prefer. And I like that word best, prefer, because if you just name your preferences, well, my preference is I don't really want to go to that job and work with people that treat me poorly, and I don't really want to keep living here in the city where people are rioting outside of my street and whatever. If you just go through your preferences for a second and leave them to be as they are, and then ask yourself, well, where can I be to just be? And normally that place should be in your home. And that home is the place that you either pay for, you rent and pay for, or you own and you build, and you have the right, you have the document, the deed, the ownership to say, I had or have and have given what it takes, right? There's give again. I have given what it takes to just be here. So for me, that's my home. And
now,
yeah, go for it.
Sorry. Just to play devil's advocate, leaving it as it is, when you're in the lab, it seems kind of counterintuitive because you're mixing and you're reacting. And how do you kind of reconcile that?
Oh, no. You definitely leave it to be. That this is the funny part. People do not understand alchemy in the lab at all, and neither do chemists. And it makes a lot of people very upset and angry and annoyed when they come and try to train with me, or have in the past when I let that happen, because I don't do it too much anymore, because people do not leave me to be as I am. And that is, no, that does not happen for me. You can do whatever you want to do over there, but when you're in my house or my lab, I am as I am. And I don't need to be told that I cannot be this way, because I am privately and quietly just doing my work. So when I take students in or run a class, because I choose to bring them in, right, to my place, they get crazy annoyed and upset, because I'm like, very first thing, right? I'll always say alchemy is not a recipe. There is no recipe, but there is a way of thinking. And that is the philosophy I teach first thing. And anybody can go and learn this philosophy from listening to your last podcast, which I talked about it there, or watching my YouTube video, which is 3 hours long, which is very kind to even give that much information on this stuff. So if people were to go and educate themselves on what I mean, they'll find it. I give it freely. And then I say, take this information. It's called the Philosopher's Stone, or squaring the circle. Take this, the 3 principles, the 4 elements, the 7 planetary archetypes, the 12 alchemical processes. Take this, contemplate it, think on it, study it more for yourself, go through it, define it for yourself, look it up, read about it, absorb every possible angle or perspective you can to see what others might have said on these things, because this is all that exists. Then go apply that to matter. And then I teach people the techniques. All right, let's go through these alchemical techniques. How do we distill? How do we calcine? How do we ferment? How do we fix? How do we congeal? How do we, go through all of it? And I teach them the processes, and I show them, and I let them do it themselves. And I say, okay, that's your toolbox. That's your paints, right? Your crayons and your paints. Now ask yourself what you want, and then use your toolbox to figure out how to make it, because there is no recipe. So then going forward into your question, aren't you pushing and pulling on it? Aren't you, not leaving it to be? You're definitely leaving it to be. So then the next thing is to figure out, well, what do I want? I want to make a spagyric. Great. What spagyric do you want? I want to make a spagyric of rosemary. Great. Where are you going to find that rosemary? I don't know. Oh, okay. Well, maybe you should, because you said, Avery, people love to do that one. Avery, you said like it's bad. Yeah, I did say. And you know what I say? I say, if you're going to make a spagyric, it has to be with a live plant. Where are you going to find a live plant? I don't know. I live in an apartment. That's not my problem. Figure out, where are you going to go find a live plant? I don't know. We don't have those. Maybe you should reconsider your location then, because I cannot make the nature be different because of your preference, right? You cannot make it change. You're leaving it as it is. So where do you find the plant? You find the plant out in nature. You find it in a garden where it's grown. And where you want rosemary, grow it. You can grow rosemary in your windowsill. You can go buy a little seed packet at Walmart and put it in a pot with some dirt. I'm pretty sure you can figure it out. It's like you do it in second grade. Put a lima bean, watch it grow, right? So you grow it and you work with it. And then that's what you'll get. You'll get your rosemary and it will let you have it. It will let you take it. So then you can take it. And if you want to take all of it, you can, because you grew it. It's not like every rosemary plant on the planet just went down. But if you go out into nature and you start taking all of that plant, or you take away an environment that made that ecosystem stable so that you could grow one massive crop, so you could just distill and get that oil and make all that money, which is seated in debt, well, then you did not leave it to be. So now you don't have any more of those things that support your environment. And even if those people don't live long enough to see that, their children do, or their grandchildren do. And then it won't let it happen. So you can't not. But let's take it even further. Let's say you have something in, you brought it into the lab. Metallics really slap you upside the face, and they show you this real hard, because it's not at all a recipe, and it never works the same way twice. You want to make an oil from a metal. You have copper, you have gold, you have whatever you have. And I'll say, okay, here is your basic outline, right? You need to take this thing. What do you have? What do you want first? Oh, I want oil of copper. Great, cool. Where are you going to go get that copper? Well, you could buy it, but someone else, that just means someone else took the work away from you, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no secret essence that comes from using some natural form of copper as opposed to a copper pipe. Copper is copper. It's an element. So you go and get that copper. However you get it from an ore, smelt it out of an ore. You get it from a stone or a crystal, or you go and you buy it from a store. Get a wire, get a pipe, get a penny, I don't know, and you get the copper. Follow then the procedure. Convert that copper. How do you convert it? How do you convert anything in chemistry? You change it with an acid or a base. So pick your path, right? Well, where do you get the acid and the base? Once again, you could buy it. Someone else has done the work, or you can make it. How do you make it? You could ferment it. You could distill it from something. You can synthesize it by putting the right salts together. You have to get your ingredients first. So there's work. It's the work. And once you have those things, you put it into that process, then it does whatever it wants. You can't control it. You can't put your hand into that acid and tell it to do this, and this. No, you put it in and you watch it do what it does. And it defines it for you.
Yeah, definitely. And in light of that, yes, I mean, if we think about it, it definitely seems people are constantly rushing and altering their lives in unnatural ways, whether it's the food they eat or the materials they wear in their clothing. And, you can go to the store and get foods that are out of season, and that's unnatural. And what I'm seeing from the alchemical perspective is that it's all about 100% being in line with nature and natural principles and processes.
100%, yeah. Because like I said, if you don't, well, it accumulates. There's cause and effect to all actions, and a thought is an action too. So that cause and effect is eventually going to lead to sustainability or not. And there's your giver and your taker once again. Did your thought and action, did it give to the sustainability of the process you are desiring, or did it take and chip away at that little bank account of energy until you no longer had any, and the whole system fails. That's what people are running from. They're afraid of. It's global warming, right? It's gonna tidal waves of ice coming down, and the coastline, the waters are rising, the rain is acid, the soil is depleted, the crops won't grow, Monsanto's our only hope. Like, yeah, that's why, because the quintessence, once again, was disregarded, and the truth was disregarded, and love was perverted in the hearts and the minds of all people. And they have been seeded with a great, great sin. They have missed the mark to like the ultimate miss here. And that is why people suffer. I don't suffer. I don't see pain. I don't see suffering. I don't see dissonance. I hear of it from the other that claims that they see it. Well, that's unfortunate. I wish they didn't. And all I can do is offer this perspective and these lessons and space and time and my awareness to it, to tell it how it can change itself and be sovereign, as I am sovereign, as nature is sovereign. It doesn't need humans to caretake it. It would do a lot better without them. So yeah, that out of season fruit, there's a little bit of take in there. Yeah. That greenhouse grown crop, that, you know, super inflated high fructose corn puff that people like, or whatever, your fucking popcorn when you go to the movies. Yeah, there's take in that. And that's the problem. It's not love.
Yeah, no, in regards to being in alignment with nature, I got kind of like a cosmic consciousness question. So, and in regards to the relationship between alchemy and astrology for humans, I saw a photo of a chart that you put together that contained the astrological correspondences between the 12 houses of the zodiac and the 12 alchemical processes. And this is something I wanted to kind of have you help me work out, because I think I have somewhat of a grasp on it, but I want to get your thoughts to get a deeper understanding for myself as well as the listeners, because I think a lot of people know their astrological sign, and, you know, they can go online and read their horoscopes and all that, but they may not know why or how it works. So is it because, like, at the hour, day, or month, one's body is born into the world under the specific conditions of the current arrangement of the constellations that are present and the positions of the planets that are most dominant as one's body enters into contact with the biosphere, that the etheric, cosmic, formative forces or planetary energies or archetypes of mind are affecting or embedding themselves into the consciousness of an individual in some way, to an extent, at some kind of like cellular or DNA level? Is that kind of your understanding, or how do you see this relationship play out in terms of like the cosmic influences in relation to the astrology?
Oh god. That's awesome. Dude, fuck if I know. I don't know. Like, just think about this for a second. Do you have eyes on Saturn? Do you have eyes on Jupiter?
No.
Do you see it on a screen, or you read it in a chart, right?
Right.
I actually do have eyes on Jupiter. I watched it rise over the mountain the other night, and it was amazing. It's extremely bright, and it doesn't matter, because what this is correspondence. Unless it is directly right now here in your awareness, then it doesn't matter. And what is in your awareness, usually as an astrologer, is some number, some chart, some word that says this or that. And that's fine. You can regard it. You can definitely consider that as a reflection of what might be, but there is only thing that is. That is truth, and that is I. So when it comes to this chart and the planets and astrology and all of this stuff, it's a trap. It's a trap because it allows you to assume or believe information. See, if I was to tell you something right now about what it is and what it means, you or someone else that's listening would believe me, and that would suck. And I don't want anyone to believe me. I ask no one to believe me. Take everything I say and doubt me. Put me up against every scrutiny you can possibly imagine. And then if you see the same thing, cool, awesome. If you don't, you're welcome to tell me. I'll listen, and I'll look for myself too. But you don't need to wait for some election. You don't need to only do an operation at this time and in this season. That's not going to change the operation. The seasons, the actual Earth seasons might, right? If you need a calcine outside, but there's a crazy blizzard, it might be a little hard. And I've run into this before. Or if it's raining and everything is wet, yeah, that also makes it difficult. So the season matters. And if you look at that astrological chart of the 12 houses and you see Aries is often related to calcination, well, what season is that? That's in a spring season when everything is like snow is melting and things are dry and you can go back outside, and calcine makes sense. It's funny. I just naturally fall into that because I pay attention to what I can and can't do outside or in the lab. And that's what dictates it, is what is here and what is now. And then from there on out, it's just correspondence. What can you glean that makes sense from this thing that is present in your world here? If you're feeling or seeing something, there's a pattern in your reality, you're like, damn, like what is going on? Like everybody is just totally backwards today. And then it's like, oh yeah, first grade day of Mercury retrograde, and then everyone loves to blame it. It has nothing to do with Mercury retrograde. It has everything to do with you being unaware. That's all it is, and it always is there every single day. Or like right now, Venus retrograde, right? I've been watching how the main focus, the main thing or medicine that would cure this whole delusional episode of the world would be love. Actually, explained that one earlier. And how funny that Venus is in retrograde and it's going through its own underworld. I think that's very interesting. So I'm not saying disregard it, but I'm not saying identify with it as a absolute either.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very, very helpful to look at and to look at every angle that you possibly can as a form of communication. So yes, the planets are in orbit. They are mathematically, going wherever they go at a certain time of a certain year, and we can predict where it will be. And that's how we have all the astrology and the ephemerises that allow us to see these things. So that is a form of communication. Big I, right, have a pattern, have a system, and that is called an archetype, or you can call it a planet or whatever. And there is a reflection for everything I am outside, what appears to be outside, in my immediate and then beyond planet experience. And so if you learn how to communicate, how to listen, you can look out and you can see that, and you can say, okay, the pattern may be that consciousness, which is the only thing that exists, will choose to take awareness of whatever, right? And that will give you an idea. But then you just leave it to be. And you don't have to hold it to that thing, because it's infinitely translatable. So really it's just the archetypes that need to be understood, the correspondence, and the moment, which is all we have. And from there, to just leave everything as it is. You want to do a certain operation that made sense for that election, but everything in your power is not working, leave it. And this is the hardest thing, going back to that lab stuff. I run into this with every single student I have ever had. I say, okay, here is your framework. And they take it as if it is a recipe. Okay, Avery said, if I do this, I get that. I did say that. Yes, if you distill this lavender and you do it in this way that I am showing you, and you follow through with these techniques that I have learned work, you will get this oil that smells like this. Check it out. Cool. Got that? Awesome. Then they go home and they set it up and they do it just the way I did it, and they don't get an oil. And they get real mad. And they're like, but you said. And I'm like, yes, I did. What did you do different that I don't do? Well, I thought it, yeah, exactly. And that's what I say. You thought. That was your first problem. You thought. No, don't think. Your thinking is stupid. You need to listen, look, be aware. That lavender hadn't bloomed. That lavender wasn't ready. It wasn't even lavender. It just looked like it because you didn't identify the plant appropriately. And it doesn't even have an oil that's distillable. So you didn't look, you didn't listen, and that's the problem. That's why you're suffering, and why you've wasted a lot of time and a lot of resources, because you didn't listen to me, then you didn't listen to nature. So it happens all day, every day. And if they do, if anyone ever does, they will succeed. And that's my point ultimately and always, is that I am always giving everyone everything at every single moment. I give them every tool they actually need, not what you think you need, not what you think you want, but what you actually need to hear, and then what you actually need to see, and then what you actually need to do. And it makes a lot of people very angry. My main experience with humanity is anger, because I say this and I do this and I do give and give and give and give and give and give. How fucking awesome is it that somebody would give you the absolute access point and direct path to achieve anything, literally anything? That's amazing, first off. That's a big, big give. And then from there, to then blame that person as not being giving, that's insane. So if you go forward into all the stuff we're talking about, right, and go back into these planets and into these operations and into nature ultimately, which is the only thing that will allow it, you have to do what it does to itself. You cannot touch anything. You cannot dictate the direction that nature goes. It might allow a little bit, just so that it can let you be as you are. But you will be the identity, which is the illusion. Because if you are actually aware of yourself, you don't ever need to look at an astrology chart ever again, because you will naturally fall in line. And everybody that is aware of this comments on it in my work and in my world. They say, wow, you are amazingly on point with astrological events. And I'm like, uh-huh, I know. Pretty cool, huh? They're like, you must really follow astrology closely. I'm like, nope, never read an astrology book in my life. And that is true. I really haven't. I don't give a shit, because I don't need to, because it's just my reflection. I don't need to look at a book ever or anything. Well, I don't need to study anything ever. I just need to listen. And I need to listen to my heart and my head, and then listen to what it's thinking, feeling, doing, and let it be as it is, and respond accordingly to what is in my environment immediately. And this happens all day, every day. Like, for example, like, let's look at Kymia. So first off, Kymia does have offerings, and those offerings are different metallic oils and essences and whatever. But if for whatever reason I cannot make an oil because it won't let me, and this literally does happen, it's currently happening, my reality will not let me make this oil, even if I do exactly what I have always done with, everything is perfect. It just won't work, and I can't do anything about that. And I can keep working at it if I wanted, but that would be forcing it, and I'm not leaving that thing to be. Nature's saying, not right now. Look at the other thing. So I do now. I do look at whatever is coming, and I shift focus. If I can't do an operation because like today, right? Power went out. I guess I got to get crafty. Or even yesterday, we're supposed to have a call. Sorry, dude. Fucking tornado came down over my house and everything blew open and died. Like, I have to go fix my reality really quick. Otherwise, I'm neglecting what is here right now. Yeah. So plans change really, really, really quickly in an instant. And that too also makes people go insane, especially in my life. Because I said, okay, 5 o'clock on this day, let's do this thing. And I'm just like, oh, sorry guys, last minute, can't go, sorry. And I do it to almost every single person I have ever met. It makes me look really, really like a bad human, basically, because I never follow through with my word. And that's right, I don't, and I won't, and I never will. I'm going to respond accordingly to what is present now, because I am nature. I'm in accordance with it, and that's called virtue. And I can be no other way. No alchemist actually could, if they actually were an alchemist and they were of this same understanding, which is the only understanding that there is. So I know it's very long-winded and I know I talk a lot, but I'm trying to walk around an idea or a subject because it's impossible to pin it down. You cannot frame, infinity, but you can bounce all about it and try to get a little bit of an idea. And that's what you're looking at. Your planets and the houses are they're archetypes. And archetypes are infinite patterns, infinite qualities of infinity. And it has to be an infinite quality if it's a quality of infinity. But it's going to meet certain sustainable and infinitely expandable qualities. And that's your planets, that's your houses, that's your astrological things, that's the colors, the numbers, the shapes, the the language of God, so to speak, and it's music. And it's really, really cool. And to speak it, that's alchemy. To understand consciousness to matter, alchemy is art. And it is a philosophy, it is a path, it is a way, it's all those things I've mentioned before. So I can't really define it in one simple think, there you go. If I do, I'll let you know. But that's why I teach these things and go around and around and all about, because it's a holographic language. Everything and everyone and forever, everywhere is saying the same thing, and it's saying these things. And it's not mysterious, and it's not even great or grand, and it isn't. It just is. And it's simple, and it's there in front of everyone's eyes all day, every day, if they would listen. And now it's here through an Avery, speaking it as clear as he possibly can, so that maybe someone somewhere might make sense of it and let go of all the garbage that's holding them back and disconnect all the identity of and belief that they harbor.
Definitely. My next couple questions are about the Flamel path in regards to producing the Philosopher's Stone as it relates to producing animated mercury. A part of this process includes preparing clean mercury to receive the masculine seed of the metallic realm, so that in 9 months' time, the two together can produce the holy hermaphrodite, aka the Philosopher's Stone, sun and moon, marriage, and so on. So I have a few questions if you can help me unpack this and elaborate on a few things. One, what is meant by the masculine seed? Would that refer to gold as it is associated with the sun? And once the clean mercury is prepared properly to receive that seed, is it what exactly is taking place chemically or alchemically from that point?
Well, I mean, alchemically, you said it. What is the masculine seed? Is it gold? Yeah, it is.
Okay.
There you go. That's the alchemical version. It's the masculine seed. It's gold. So I don't know how else to define that one. That one's.
And then
out. Yeah.
So I guess my other question is, does Mercury in this context represent the feminine? I would have assumed silver would represent the feminine as it is associated with the moon, but no?
So think about this. Let's look at masculine and feminine as the basic archetypes that they usually embody. So, feminine is usually the receptive, and then masculine is usually the giver here. Okay. So even like you look at a plug on the wall, electrical plug, you have the female and then the male. You have the insert and the thing it inserts to. It's like dick and vag, like everyone knows it, right? It's masculine, feminine. So the masculine gives, the feminine receives. So now think about that for a second. Do you know what happens when you put gold in mercury?
I'm assuming that the mercury receives the gold in some way.
Do you know what it's called? Have you ever looked into that?
I haven't.
There you go. So if you can look at that, it'll tell you, and it will help you understand the difference between mercury and silver, and you can see for yourself why the one you perceive to be the feminine is the way it is based upon what I just said. That's speaking this language. That's looking and listening and understanding through correspondence. So, and it's just that easy. And it's not hard. Like, you can look it up anywhere online. The Philosopher's Stone is a joke. Not a joke because it's not real. It's a joke because it is real and it's in front of everyone's face. And it's blowing my mind that people that study alchemy don't see it. But it's because they believe and they assume. Don't take a book or a word, not even mine, of course, as being the path. And that's why you'll see a lot of debate. Anyone that's interested in making a physical stone, the very first thing it ever says within any of those texts is only by the grace of God, right? So then they have all their crazy prayers and they ramble on just like I do. And then they give you all this stuff. Well, take this much of this and that, and it's crazy correspondence. And they are actually giving you the path if you can understand the language. And there is no secret code that is indefinite across every single text. And no text follows the same path twice. So no one agrees with anybody. And that's really, really confusing. If you're a logical thinker, you can't think. That's the first problem. Oh, you thought. Yeah, don't think. If you just look at it, nature and the qualities, it's so obvious. And just starting there with masculine and feminine, that's really important because that's a really big conversation in the world too, is the man, right? Like how females are not equal to males and blacks are not equal to whites and inequality across the board. Like how childish to even say such a thing. Of course, female and male are equal, but they're not even what they are. Like if you look at the yin yang symbol, the black, the white, and how it kind of like makes that S down the middle, and each one has the little seed of the other inside of itself. The white has the black dot, the black has the white dot, and it's in motion, right? It's moving towards the small end of the other, and they're constantly transforming. Feminine is always constantly transforming into masculine, which turns into feminine, and we have these qualities within ourselves at all times. And now we're watching female turn into male, quite literally, and male turn into female. And people are getting sex changes, and transgender is a big conversation, right? They are transitioning. They are literally they now. That is their preferred pronoun. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, right? I don't care. I'm just saying this is what I am watching in the world. So, and then this is an important conversation if you want to understand the stone. So the Philosopher's Stone can only be found physically if you first find it internally, and forever. And it's the very first thing I teach to anybody. I say, okay, let's learn the Philosopher's Stone. And then everyone doesn't understand it. And I'm like, that's why you'll never find it. Because I literally just gave you every single answer and I defined every single word so that you never had to ever question what I mean or interpret. And anyone can go and get this information for free anywhere on the internet where I am speaking. So if we look at this male-female thing again, gold and Mercury, masculine, feminine. So let's just think about this. So first, like think of the story of the genesis of everything, like God created the heaven and the earth sort of story. So God, the Father, is usually how people put it. The biblical God is the Father. And of course, there's all those people that argue like Mother Goddess Gaia. That's fine. Go for it. God the Father. Why is God a father? Because God created. God gave. He was the giver here. He moved upon the waters. And then it goes into the whole thing. So he's the giver. That's masculine. That's why God was the father there. It's not saying God is a man. It's saying a masculine energy is here. It is a giving energy. So then from there, if the masculine gives, there has to be something to receive it. So that is the feminine. So now you have a feminine quality. What did God move upon? The waters. What does water do? It takes any shape of any vessel it is in. It receives whatever is put into it. It just like bloop, goes right in, right? It's very feminine in its qualities. Male is often fire, feminine is often water. If you have the two triangles of the four elements, the fire element is the up and the water element is the down triangle. Bring them together, you have the six-pointed star, the Star of David, the same star that all those crazy black cube people are like, it's evil, like 666. Like, have you ever looked at the symbol for the heart chakra? Yeah, it's a six-pointed star, heart, love, green, growth, nurturing, spring, abundance of fertility. Interesting. I guess they missed that point. Yeah, they did. And they got concerned and afraid. And all distracted on something else. But anyways, going back. So the masculine goes into the feminine, and the feminine now has a seed. And once the feminine has a seed, what does that feminine do? Oh, it starts giving. It gives to the seed. It nurtures the seed. It just flipped into masculine. How interesting. And then that seed is nurtured and it grows. And if you want to look at how something might be born, well, now a life is born, and in the sense of the alchemical story, the holy hermaphrodite, right? It's equally masculine as it is feminine. And I don't know if anyone has ever actually read the story of Hermaphrodite. It was first like an ancient mythology tale. And Hermaphrodite is a son. It's the son of Hermes and Aphrodite. They had Hermes, Hermaphrodite. And he was a male, a very beautiful boy, who eventually went to a sacred fountain. And there was a nymph who fell in love with Hermaphrodite. And she was so in love with him that she was like a stage 57 clinger and just wouldn't leave him alone. And he could not stand her. He said, go away, a million times, and she wouldn't. She was a stalker. Like, it was intense. And she loved him so much that she prayed to the gods to just be with him forever. Like, even if she just had to like merge and become him and just be him himself. And the gods granted her wish, and they merged them together. And the nymph was put inside of Hermaphrodite, but he remained a male. He didn't become half female. He now had the essence of femininity within him. And everyone misses that point of the story where they pervert it to tell it a different way. And then they get confused. And then people are going to listen to this and they're going to be like, Avery said, when they go read the story and they find that he was half female, half male. No, that's not what it means. It's not what was actually said if you go back to the source, which no one ever does. So the holy hermaphrodite has nothing to do with the quality of both. It has to do with the expression of both. And each one always has the seed of the other. Every woman is also masculine. Every masculine male is also feminine. And we get to choose. A feminine man might look like a metro homosexual sort of individual in the eyes of some super, unfeminine hick guy from Texas that cares about guns and trucks. Yeah. He would judge that person, right? Because it's a very feminine male externally. But no, it's not. It's just that expression. That same man can be that hick man that's super unfeminine and vice versa. And there's no reason to ever judge or whatever. But when you merge the two together, they make a form in themselves, and that's called an amalgam. And that amalgam is pliable. It's like Play-Doh. It's neither solid or liquid. It's neither masculine nor feminine. It's the transition, right? It's hard to kind of say. It could go either way, I guess, and you could push it one direction or the other, and it can go back into being liquidy or it can go back into being solid. It doesn't matter. So that quality internally, it's first a thing internally, masculine and feminine. And if it isn't found, that balance, then it's lost. And if you can't find it inside, then you definitely can't find it outside, because it's consciousness that creates matter, not the other way around. So you can't just go and stumble upon the stone. No. You have to become conscious of the stone, and the stone is an absolute paradox. And this is why it drives people insane when they look for it all their lives and they never find it, because it does not exist. You exist. I exist. That's how you find it, is by finding I. If you find that I eternally and infinitely in every direction and in everything, and you can speak it, show it, then you'll find the stone. And it's really simple. And then you'll find the path. And the path will just show you. It'll just reveal itself. You don't even have to study it. Actually, never study it. You can, like, if you want to, of course, read a book, like get some ideas, get some language under your belt, but don't ever attempt it or try it until it just lets it happen. Because it's literally that which could not be simpler. And it's so simple that it's hidden in plain sight. And when it does become manifest, it becomes manifest without any single effort. And that is the greatest of works. That's the magnum opus, because the real work is not looking at it. I dare anybody out there who's trying to understand it or find it to never look at the Philosopher's Stone again, but instead look at love, look at virtue, look at truth, look at the embodiment of those things, look in, look out, just look and listen, and then leave everything to be and act with virtue. And the most important of all virtues, like the virtue, is integrity. If you were going to start anywhere on virtues, I actually have 12 virtues that I list as my rules. Anybody that comes into my lab, that comes into my house, that comes onto my website, that goes to any class that I ever teach, I literally will have next to me a list of my 12 virtues. I say, that's how we act here. That's how we think. And if you can't do that, you can go away, because I don't care. And it's simple. And the first one is integrity. So this is the greatest one of all. And if you can't get this, you're not going to get anywhere, and you're never going to get a stone. Integrity is a compound word, in and tajir. In means no. Tajir, tegre, it means to touch. No, touch. Don't touch. Just like love. Leave it be. To act with integrity is to not touch it. Neither push away what you don't want or pull in what you do want. Just leave it to be, show it love. If you do, it will naturally transform. And then the greatest of all is to let yourself be. Don't even touch who you are. Don't try to change your internal or external. Don't say that a thought or a feeling is good or bad, that your body is beautiful or ugly, that you want to be a man or a woman. Like, no, just leave it to be. Don't touch it. And I guarantee you the path will reveal itself, because it's the way I found mine, and it's the way everyone has ever found that true path, and then the truth, which is the stone. And so it seems scary, because if you stop touching things, if you stop trying so much, oh, what's going to happen? Well, I don't know, but I bet you anything, a lot of stuff's going to fall apart. Yeah, that's scary. You're going to lose your friends. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose a lot of things. And what did we just have happen the past month? Everyone got quarantined where they couldn't do anything. They literally could not touch each other. They couldn't touch, like, going out into the world. They couldn't go to work. They couldn't go anywhere. They could go to the store, get some food, and go home. How awesome is that? Integrity, truth was literally forced upon the planet, because that's how delusional human beings are. And that was the very, very thing they need. And it's the thing I'm saying now. I'm in full support. I think everyone should go home again and quarantine themselves and stop touching everything. Do you know what happened around here when everybody went home? I went out for a hike in the first time in 6 months. It was amazing, because I actually had a moment, because I've been working every single day, sometimes for 3 or 4 days awake, where I don't eat, I don't sleep, because I have so many people that need me for something, and they take. It's insane. I went outside for a hike for the first time in 6 months with my dog, who I'm so grateful that I got to do that, because I felt so bad for her this whole time. And nature was blowing up. It was like green and blossoming, and then plants were massive, and there wasn't trash all over the place from all the people that go out there and just throw their beer cans and like McDonald's bags all around. There wasn't giant ruts all over the place. There wasn't people shooting at trees for who knows what reason. Like, it was lush and vibrant, and like the rivers were just thick of water, and it was crystal clear and fresh, and bees and bunnies and flowers and deers. Like, it was like Snow White, man. It was awesome. And I have never seen nature look so beautiful. And I grew up in nature. I've hiked all of my life, and it's because no one touched it. How amazing. I wish to see more of that. But as soon as anybody got the chance, basically the world forced Corona to stop happening so that they could go back and just start fucking with everything. Yeah, and now here they all are again, and what are they doing? They're touching everything. They're throwing rocks and bricks at it. Like, I had a friend that was shot in the back from rioters the other day.
Holy
How
shit.
insane. Defending his own shop, sitting, minding his own business in his own shop, and people came and just shot him because he was in his own home, in his own business. That's nuts, man. That's insanity. And that's what people do. They kill the thing that just is simply there existing. They kill the world, and they kill themselves and others. And they do deserve to die in that way with their suffering and watch their world burn, because they're the ones that are burning it. And if I go down with it, that's fine. If anyone goes down with it, that's fine. Because you know what that does? It solves 100% of my problems. And that is the best thing I could have ever imagined. I will gladly see that. And I bet no one on this planet thinks that way. And I bet they think I'm insane when I do, and I hope that they do, because that's exactly what you need to look at, is the fear point. Everyone does.
Yeah.
So I know I'm ranting once again, but I am telling everyone and everything always what they need to hear, because this is the truth.
The
And
rants
it is a hard truth.
are always appreciated. Today, on that note, today is June 6th, the reunion of the Battle of Heliopolis, the siege on the Eastern Byzantine Empire in Egypt that occurred in 640 AD, something I knew very little about until you brought it to my awareness.
Yeah, I
So,
wrote a post one time.
Heliopolis was known as the City of the Sun. Can you talk about the historical importance of that site as it relates to alchemy?
I don't know. Like, how does it relate to alchemy? Well, everything relates to alchemy, because alchemy is all there is.
Yeah.
So I could relate it forever. Heliopolis, it's the sun. What's the sun? It's gold. What's the sun and gold? What else are they? Well, they're the crown. They're the consciousness. They're the awakened consciousness, I guess, the exalted or endowed. I don't know, whatever. They're kingly, and that's what it was all about. Heliopolis was about that. It was about being aware and being conscious, and that is what alchemy is about too. Consciousness into matter, bringing that consciousness down into form so that I am conscious and I consciously allow all these other things to exist as they are so that they can consciously go on living, the plants, the animals, whatever. And that's amazing. So if you take that to the highest degree and you put it into technology or form and you make a city that is designed with that in mind, well, it is badass, because it means you have free energy, you have infinite abundance in every direction, and you have beings that are living virtuously and with love. And that's amazing. And that was the biggest threat, right? That was Akhenaten, who is Moses, who is the guy that Exodus, across the desert with the Israelites. That was his city. That's what he was about. And he was literally chased out because he gave that truth, that awareness, and that power back to everything. When you build a city with that technology that was there at Heliopolis, and the obelisks of Heliopolis that brought down that energy into the ground and seeded it across the quartz crystals that were laid at the foundation stones of every single temple there, and you fed them with energy and the proper resonance that kept everything perfectly in tuned and aligned within the awareness and consciousness and being of anything there, you have perfect health, perfect vision, perfect everything. And you do not die, and you do not confuse, and you do not miscommunicate, and you do not take. And that was a very, very beautiful thing. And there's a reason people brought it down, because they're crazy and they're afraid. And now it's gone, and that's a bummer. And it's like a big middle finger in the sky when they take those obelisks and they bring them all over the world. Like, look at my treasure. Yeah, whatever.
Well, it's coming up on 2 hours, so I got a lot more questions, but I'll try to wrap it up. This might be kind of a huge question, so feel free to respond in whatever way you want, as long-winded as you want, from whatever angle. You've dug deep into various historical texts that your average Joe or Jane will just simply never read or even hear about. You've also read multiple versions of the Bible and the history around that. with all the research and all the knowledge you've accumulated from the ancient manuscripts and scriptures and your experiences, what is your takeaway in regards to the Bible or the books that make up the common Bibles these days as we know them? What issues do you find? What are some of the common misunderstandings or misinterpretations you see many people have around biblical text? And how were other ancient literature influence? How did the other ancient literature influence you on your quest and shift kind of your perspective and bring you to your current understanding now that you hold?
Yeah. So probably people have heard the stories if they listen to other, podcasts or things that I've written about how I found alchemy. And I found it essentially through Christianity. And I was raised Christian, I believed it, and eventually I let it also go and drift away. But I know the Bible inside and out, and I've read it many times. I've actually recently reread much of the Bible, and I really appreciate it. But I didn't understand it at first, and I don't think many do, because it's abstract. It doesn't make sense, and it seems like belief, and that's a problem. But it's not. It's that people choose to believe in it. And I read all those different versions and translations and through different languages and gone through all the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi texts, the Gnostic Bible, the Apocrypha, all that stuff. And I've looked at it very closely, and I always try to look at it in the first language I can find it in, meaning like it was written in. But then there's usually discoveries of ones that are older. And so it begins to change a little bit, and then it just gets super ambiguous, and that's fine. But the Bible in general, the greatest takeaway, I would say, is that I see it as a never-ending story. It really is the never-ending story, because it's always alive. It isn't about, the Old Testament, and like I've even mentioned, Moses and the Exodus and stuff, the book of Genesis, and you find Noah and the ark, all these stories. These were not, and they also were real people. But I say they are not real people because it has nothing to do with the person. It has everything to do with I. And that's when I say that, everybody should be saying that internally. Look at yourself when I say I. So it's the never-ending story because it's still here, it's still alive, and it's happening right now. You can read the book of Revelations, and yeah, it will look identical. You can also read the book of Exodus and the exodus of the Israelites out of Egypt from slavery. It will look identical to what's happening now. You can read any book of that Bible, and it will be identical to what is happening right now, because these are archetypical stories. You'll find these same archetypical stories across every religion, and people will then debate what is real and what is not because they're confused. And they think that the world is actually real and that they are actually separate from it. And that is their own delusion once again. These are archetypical stories that are alive within everything and everyone, and they will continue to repeat again and again and again in every moment, and therefore they are infinitely applicable. And if you can just take them as that and look at it as it is, both an analogy and metaphor, also a correspondence, it can be a recipe, if you will, of mind or form. It can be a time in history if you want, but none of that actually exists anywhere other than right here, right now, and within my mind, even my awareness that is perceiving to have some physical experience. That's all in my head, because I'm apparently, translating that from electrical impulses that my ears and my eyes and my skin and whatnot, that my nervous system delivers to my brain to turn into an image or a sound. It's all in the head. It's all a dream. And so if people could do that and read in that way, they have the ultimate manual for infinity, and it's infinitely applicable. And the greatest thing anyone could do with that manual is to learn the alchemical language, to learn the Philosopher's Stone philosophy that I teach, that you'll find on those videos that are in our last talk, and then apply it. And I know that's hard for many people because they do lack a foundation of wisdom and understanding, but that's why you need to go do your work. I cannot do anyone's work. I cannot answer anyone's questions and everyone's questions. I mean, I can't do that because that means I'm now not doing my work. I have my own work and I have my own thing going on. And I am out here in the mountains in the middle of nowhere doing that thing alone, far away from everyone that I know, so that I can focus on that thing. But all day, every day, I have every single possible communication that people can try to get at me with, so I can just tell them what to do or just give it to them because they don't want to do their work, because they're lazy. The only thing there is the work. That is the great work. That is the Philosopher's Stone, is to just live your life and listen to it and let it be what it is and stop trying to change it, act with some integrity. And if you do, you can read that Bible. And it really is the Word of God because I wrote it. It's that easy. And if you can look into it and then translate it to the outside of what is happening, it'll tell you what's coming next. Just like the astrology, right? It's just a pattern. I know exactly what's coming next for every single person on this planet. And it looks crazy when people watch me do it. They call it God mode. When they watch Avery go God mode, because it scares the shit out of them, because I start acting like an oracle or a prophet, and I can tell anyone anything about themselves, and it's, oh my God, you're psychic. Yeah, maybe. No, I'm just watching and listening and feeling and hearing, but I understand it as it is, and it's not getting put through some filter of mind. Like every word I use, every perspective I give, is just, a translation of the infinite, of the self, for another to resonate with. And many people, I don't know if you ever heard the saying that you can only meet someone as far as you've met yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's very, very true. If you have no context to what someone is talking about, you don't understand them, and you cannot meet them, so to speak. You cannot resonate. But when we resonate, it's because we share the same tone. So if it's like an octave. You hit a C on a piano, and the higher octave C, it'll resonate because they're singing back and forth. Yeah, that's resonance. So when anyone resonates with anything I say, they have it alive within them, even if they don't understand why. And they're like, oh my God, you're speaking to everything in my entire life. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Amazing, right? No, not really. It's not amazing at all. It's the only thing that's ever been there. And it's just there. Like, you can, of course, have reverence for it and respect it. Absolutely. But it is not something to identify with. And when people don't resonate, it's because they lack it. And it doesn't mean I or they are wrong. It just means there is a lack. And that lack cannot exist within I, because I am infinite, infinitely abundant, Alpha and Omega. Yeah, I am. That's what's up. So that Bible, I love the Bible. I think it's amazing. I read my Bible every day now, actually. And I read all the other scriptures too. And I'm not religious. I do not believe. I do not follow any God. I don't put myself in the place of God as a human being. I just simply exist, and I resonate with what it says. The Rig Veda, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, the Old Testament, the Torah, all the Dead Sea Scrolls. I started reading the Copper Scrolls. Does anyone even know about that? Probably not. Exactly. It's more Dead Sea Scrolls that people don't pay attention to. It's a treasure hunt. That's what's up, man. Because when you do start living your life, really living, people don't actually know what living looks like. No one has ever actually lived. And that's why they are killing everyone and everything. And they're like basically killing me because I can't live either. But I do, and I find my time. And I make my time, actually. And the Copper Scrolls are awesome because it's a treasure hunt. Because when you start living, your life becomes a quest. It becomes a video game. It gives you all these little items, magical items, actually, that do really crazy things. And people think you're nuts if you're into it or talk about it like I am right now. And it would never make sense to them because it's illogical. But the truth is illogical. It's beyond the mind. It's infinity cannot be grasped with the mind. It's paradoxical. It's neither yes nor no. It is yes and no. It exists and it doesn't exist. You know, it's like the Tao. It's that which cannot be named. So I'm into all of those things. And I think people should read the sacred scriptures because they're sacred for a reason. And I think they should contemplate them as the never-ending story that is a mirror of the soul. And it may have been, you know, tweaked here and there. It may have been translated. It may have lost some meaning or, you know, inferred belief. But no belief is true. And if you ever believe anything in anyone, including yourself, then you're wrong because it cannot exist. It's a fallacy. So I encourage everyone to look at it openly and to gain whatever they can. And if you don't understand it, educate yourself. And don't ask me. Go look into it for yourself. Go do your own research. Go infer your own meaning. Go write down in your own notebooks and do the work that I do. And you will know. And you will not have to take my word, because that's the thing. Anyone who ever takes my word, they will fail, because they do not have it within themselves and they have to believe me. And I don't want that. But I am here to give clear direction anywhere I can, and inspiration and you know, reflection, I guess, so that someone can gain the opportunity to see, and they have to then go do the work. So I'll wrap that one up. I'll stop ranting, and
All
I'm
right.
sure someone somewhere will figure it out, and they will either hate me or love me or do whatever they want. But whatever you do, you're just doing it to yourself. So like, cool, don't care. But I actually really do appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak and to share, and to give perspective. And it's awesome, you know, that we got to do this again.
Yeah,
So thank you very much.
definitely blows my mind. Any last thoughts before we depart?
No, I think I pretty much covered it.
Yeah, I think so. Well, you are greatly appreciated, and yeah, just thank you again for your time. So
Yeah, thanks a lot.